Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your best, most true, authentic business voice, which is quite a mouthful. Maybe it's just find your most true, authentic voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results. Take a couple steps forward in regards to ways that you can shake a couple of the chains off of you in order to, again, move forward. And the way that we get to do that typically is we bring people on the program who walk the walk. My guest today is absolutely no exception in terms of that. And I'm delighted because I know today's guest, which is fun for me, but there's a ton I don't know, so I don't want to sound like some stupid expert. But in the meantime, folks, welcome the Executive Director of North 10 Philadelphia, Josh Klaris, to the show. Josh, welcome, man.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm excited to have a good conversation.
Me too. And folks, Josh is the second, well, technically the third, I guess, if we also include Jay Duran, who does a lot of volunteer work and contributions. But yeah. Nikki Bagby, Jay Duran, and now Josh. This organization, North 10 Philadelphia, is an organization that I'm embarrassed to say, until I was asked to go to an event, I guess it was approaching 2 years ago, I remember saying to that person, Jay Duran, who, if you're a friend of our podcast, you know Jay Duran. And it was like, I don't know anything about them. Yeah. Why do I need to? And blah, blah. Yeah, and I just sounded like an egg. Yeah. And
I wouldn't be embarrassed by that, John. I mean, I think, we really were an under-the-radar nonprofit organization doing good work, but we weren't in the public mindset at that point. So nothing to be embarrassed about.
Well, I'm relieved because, folks, when you get to know North 10 Philadelphia, honest to God, you'll be like, so why are they under the radar? But in the meantime, I like the fact, in addition, this is where in terms of continuing getting to know the path that leaders take to get to a certain direction. We've got somebody here who has over 20 years in regards to nonprofit, to education, to leadership, to teaching, to running schools. And I'm always curious to get started. Oh, and has a ton of New York in their background too.
I do.
Josh, you come from an education background.
Yeah.
What got you to choose education in the first place?
So I was very involved in basic volunteerism and community service, starting in college. Got activated. Honestly, the easiest way to put it is I got activated because a friend of mine was a big brother in the Big Brother, Little Brother program on my college campus at Tufts University. And so he convinced me to have a little. And I loved it. I loved the volunteering. I loved being of service to a young person that needed a mentor. And then that kind of just spread into other volunteer activities and really thinking about that as a career, to be completely honest. And as luck as have it, I graduated college in 1990 and happened to be the first year of an organization called Teach for America.
Teach for America. Yep.
That point had never been known. And I got lucky enough to follow that path.
And that got you to Louisiana, easy for me to say. But before we head down to St. Mary's Parish, let me ask you something about that. You just said something a moment ago, which I love this because sometimes, like, I'm looking for answers, or I just assume that it is the most noble of reasons as to why somebody goes down this path. And then sometimes it's an easy introduction. So go back to the part where you were saying, my friend asked me to do something, right? Was there any resistance on your part?
Actually, no. There wasn't a resistance other than, like, would I be good enough? Did I have enough time? Things like that.
Yeah.
But I was definitely seeking it out. I think I definitely was looking for something of meaning. Coming from I went to a private high school in New
Right.
York City, a very elite
Mhm.
private high school, and I was going to a private New England liberal arts college, in Boston,
Mhm.
and I definitely had something that was in me that was looking for something of meaning, and I didn't know what that was, and so I was looking and I was searching, and I was lucky enough to then meet people that had thought about it more than I had, and had actually started really thinking about the act. And that day, it was really about community service and volunteering. There wasn't the language of equity, of social justice
Mhm.
that it was that is as prevalent as it is now. So it was really a matter of volunteering my time and doing something worthwhile with it.
So you pack up and head way down south.
I
What was
did.
that? What was that experience like for you? Not just doing the being of service, but also taking that foray into St. Charles, right? I just want to make sure I remember.
St. Mary
St.
Parish.
Mary, sorry, right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
St. Mary Parish.
St. Mary Parish in Louisiana. What was that like? The reload, the whole bit.
Wow. So life changing is the
Yeah.
easiest, way to put it for me. Not only because of the professional experience, which I'll talk about, but as we mentioned, I'm a New Yorker. I'm born and raised in Lower Manhattan.
Mhm.
My parents are New Yorkers. My grandparents were New Yorkers, and so city living and urban living is all I knew and all I understood, all
Right.
I loved and all I appreciated. And to be completely honest, was a little, snotty about the whole thing. And so the experience of going to what Teach for America referred to as rural Louisiana, which it was, right? So St. Mary Parish, if you don't know, is on the southern the most southern central part of Louisiana. It has its border right on the bayou.
Wow.
It's the home of the Shrimp and Petroleum Festival.
Mm.
In Morgan City, Louisiana, and it was extraordinarily different than anything that I experienced before in my life. The people were different. They sounded different. They spoke differently, and their priorities were different than things that I understood.
Mm.
And it really gave me like just a lifelong kind of appreciation that different isn't better or worse. It's different, right? And there was so much for me to learn from it. In particular, this part of Louisiana, folks should know that it has a very vibrant and important community of Vietnamese refugees. And so not only was it transformational in terms of the people I got to know, the Vietnamese community there was unbelievably important to my experience, and got me not only into teaching because half my class were kids of Vietnamese families, and spoke English
Mhm.
as a second or an additional language, but that became part of my trajectory as a teacher. So I taught kindergarten in a little elementary school. Half my kids didn't speak English. The other half spoke an English that was very different than the English that I had known or knew, and we learned together. We learned how to speak to each other. We learned how to relate to each other. We learned how to read. I learned how to be a teacher, and it was truly a remarkable experience for me.
Josh, what were you just named some of the inherent benefits in regards to working, the importance, as you just said a moment ago, with working with Vietnamese students and being
Mhm.
acclimated to some that didn't speak the language and some that
Yeah,
spoke it differently, and the benefits of all of that. When you were done, and then you head back to New York.
York. Yeah.
What did you take with you in addition,
Yeah.
so that I don't force you to repeat? Different isn't better or worse, it's just different.
Different.
In addition, what else did you take with you?
So I took a what some people would refer to as a calling, right? Like I was meant to be a teacher,
Yeah, okay.
and so when I returned back home to New York, I learned how to actually do it. I felt like I did it almost on instinct and with some kind of basic training that I received from Teach for America. But I really wanted to learn not just like that part of teaching, but there's a science to teaching that I think is really important as an educator, right? Like we know how to teach English as an additional language. And so I went and I got my master's degree in teaching English to second language learners. And also I got my certification as a elementary school teacher. And so, being a good person, trying hard, working hard, all important. But that's not all that there is to teaching, right? There's actually let's learn what phonemes and phonetics are. Let's learn about, theories of math and mathematical education and how to think mathematically and how do we apply those to our teaching and our lesson planning. And that to me was really important, that it wasn't just, it's way more than being a volunteer, right? Like it's a profession, and it should be honored as a profession. And our greatest teachers are the most brilliant people, because they not only know all that, but they know how to apply it to this incredible diversity of children who come in with all of their experiences, and we're supposed to kind of figure out what the science tells us and how to apply it to individuals. And to be honest, that's what kept me in the profession for as long as it did.
Right.
It's the hardest thing that I could ever imagine doing, and I loved that part of it. It took every ounce of my intellectual power to be able to figure out how to spark the intellectual, ability of my students.
So what gave you the grit to stay with it? Because I would think there would be
Yeah.
a lot of reasons to.
I can give, credit, absolutely easy credit to my mother, who was an incredibly hardworking, mostly single mother. My father was very much in my life, but my parents got divorced when I was very young, and my mother raised my brother and my sister and I, single-handedly, and never missed a day of work. Would always go there. Was a very seminal kind of model of my life in terms of what it meant to take care of family, but also kind of care about your work. I think that's absolutely right. I also have the story of having a teacher in high school. Ironically, it was my band teacher who kind of taught me both what it is to be skillful. He was this wonderful jazz musician, and he taught these kind of knucklehead private school kids how to appreciate and play jazz. And that in itself was pretty special. But he also brought the passion of it. He loved his music, and he kind of gave us that passion to it. And he worked his butt off. I mean, he just was always on for us and always there. I think seeing those and having those models in our lives is really important. I could generally be, characterized as a hard worker. I care about quality, and so if it doesn't look right or doesn't feel right, I want to keep going at it until I get it, at least close to right. I'm not a perfectionist, but I want it to feel as if it's the way it should be, and so that's what I brought into it.
I love it. Two questions on that. What did your mom do for a living?
A whole variety of things. So that was
So did my mom. That's why I'm always like,
imagine
mom did a bunch of
a
things.
single mother in 1972 New York City, and so she did everything from work at a political campaign. She worked for off-track betting when I was really young, and in their marketing department. She got her degree as a stockbroker, or her certification and license as a stockbroker. She was a real estate broker. She did whatever it took in order to do the things that, she always wanted to love work. I think I appreciated that too. Like, don't just go to work because, you have to. We have to go to work. We have to make a living, but find the things that you love to do it. And I learned that from her.
I think that sort of being able to not put yourself into just one direct path is really interesting in terms of what you just said in regards to your mom. Like I said, I shout out to her. My mom worked for the government. My mom worked for a mutual fund company in Philadelphia. My mom has done acting later on. I just think it's really to hear the diversity. And when it's centered on, and I believe you when you say, she did what she had to do.
And it's an intellectual curiosity, right, John? I think like that. She's still that way. She's 86. Last 15, 20 years, she's become a Tai Chi master and a teacher. She's an expert potter, and does this beautiful artwork. And when I was a kid, I would never have considered my mother an artist. And she very much is an artist, and has proven that. And so, that curiosity and that commitment to be a lifelong learner, she's a great model of that.
I think it's beautiful. Hey, the other follow-up question was literally in regards to your band teacher. What did you play, and do you still?
No, I don't. Don't
Okay.
tell him.
What did you play?
But I was a trumpet player. I did play
Okay.
through college, and again, like to the art and science of teaching, I had no right to consider myself a musician. I don't have a good. I have some rhythm, but it was fun and it was interesting. And he actually put a band together of a group of us that really loved playing together and didn't know much about, if anything, about jazz. And I think that was something that, to me also it was about it being, he like formed a team, like our band was our team.
Okay.
And that great culture that he brought to
Mhm.
it. And the trumpet aspect of it was cool. I got to play it, but I'm not a musician. No.
No, but you got to experience some of the benefits and
My God, and that's what a great teacher does, right?
right? I
I mean,
mean,
you
that's
can learn math, but you don't have to be a mathematician. You can appreciate good literature, but you don't have to be a read a book a week
Mhm.
kind of person. Like
Right.
it's just having those experiences that I do think is very, very important.
So your first foray, it's if unless I got it wrong, in terms of going beyond the teaching dynamic and more on the business side was about 20 years ago, if I'm doing my own math right, where you go to the Dream Charter School and you're
Oh yeah, yep.
first principal and oh, and what do you know? And the executive director. So
Yeah, so running a charter school is very different than running a district public school because it is its own nonprofit. I was very fortunate, and so what I brought to that, and I think that this was where I started, and even and in relationship with the organization, which at that time was called Harlem RBI, that we formed an after school program, and then we created Dream Charter School.
Mhm.
I think that kind of scratched an itch of mine, which was an entrepreneurial,
Got it.
itch, right?
Mhm.
Like how can I create, or how can I create something with these ideas
Mhm.
and these experience that I have that is a little bit different and hopefully a little bit better and activates and engages a group of kids that are harder typically
Mhm.
to engage in a school environment. And so we started as a summer program and out of school time program after school, and then we came together and we started Dream Charter School together, which kind of combined this idea of a school and that provided lots of wraparound services, so a holistic model of providing school day and after school and social services and all year round schooling. So very much part of that model, but also was dedicated to meeting kids with divergent intellectual and academic needs,
Mhm.
and so it was built on a team model of co-teaching, and so every classroom had two teachers
Mhm.
who had to work together to meet the needs of the kids in their classroom. And so there was more of the entrepreneurial part of it, of the business, right? And so how do we make this model, which was a little bit more of an expensive model, two teachers, obviously, and how can we fit that into the economic environment of running a school? And so that was a really interesting part of it. I was not the brains of the business side of it. I had a partner who really was the one who was able to figure that out, and my job was to implement it. But I think that the kind of running the business of it, how to hire, who to hire, when to no longer work with somebody, what the key metrics of success
Mhm.
were, and how economics is a part of that, right? Like you have to make sure you can afford to do what you've set out to do.
So this is in terms of what you currently do. By the way, I saw a quote from you, which identified you just said in terms of with the two-member team, things that your teammate did well versus you. You would put up a quote in a different context, which I also liked a lot too, where it says you were describing how to make things work, and you're like, you don't need to be a master in all. It's helpful to feel like you have expertise in one and can develop general understanding of others, and then hire to your weaker points. So,
Mhm.
what I wanted to ask you about what you just said and that quote is the following, which is I would imagine when you're coming from a come from contribution and service related and give. Well, now it seems as you are progressing toward entrepreneur and leading into what you're currently doing, it's a lot more than just give, although it might feel like give. There's a lot of I need to get,
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
need to find, I need to.
Yeah.
How like in terms of what you said, you had to make other pieces work. How did you either learn the skills or hire for the skills then to realize that it's a lot more than just giving in order to
Yeah.
do something,
Well,
especially
let
nonprofit
me
work.
answer that in two different ways. And the
Yeah,
first one is more of a personal one. It actually harkens back to college, to my friends, but having a debate over time about altruism and
right.
not believing that there's, I'm not one to believe that there's like a purely altruistic endeavor here, right? So you
Mhm.
always get like, so my experiences, whether or not I was a volunteer in college or whether or not I was teaching, I actually always believed that I was getting at least as much as I was giving. And that's what
Okay,
made it so enjoyable and actually
great.
sustained me. And I wasn't, like, let's be real, I wasn't getting in terms of financial
Yeah.
rewards, but I was getting so many other things. I was getting
Mhm,
relationships. I was getting knowledge.
mhm,
I was in communities and who were accepting me in ways that were
mhm,
filling my cup, to use a
mhm.
current
Sure.
expression. That was great. So to that regard, the volunteer is a mindset, but I think like it
Mhm,
truly becomes a lifelong thing when you realize that you're being fed as much as you're feeding, so to speak.
mhm,
Uh, that being said, I think that one of the things that I've had to learn over these years,
mhm,
particularly when it comes to running a nonprofit, is this idea that it's not just about how much I can do or how much I'm getting from this, but that I have to get other people involved.
right.
It is very much my job
Mhm,
to attract others to my cause and to my mission. As a teacher, I didn't have to do that,
mhm,
right? Even as a school principal,
mhm.
I had to do it more obviously than a teacher, but I didn't have to go convince people that they should come and be a part of this. And that is very much of my job now.
Right.
And to attracting other
Mhm,
employees to this work of why it's worthwhile to work for this nonprofit
mhm,
in North Philadelphia that's doing a work very particular to a community, why that would be important to others that either don't know the community or aren't connected to the community or don't really understand the work that we're doing. And so, for lack of a better expression, there's a salesmanship to that. And I mean that in a very positive way, right? Like there's negative connotations to salesmanship, but good salespeople
mhm.
are not blowing smoke,
No.
right? Like there's a real product here. There's a real ethos here that is worth talking about and talking about it clearly
Mhm,
and in ways that other people can really relate to. And so that has absolutely been important, a learning that I've had to do in order to attract both funders, and that's individual donors as well as corporate and foundations for grants, but to your point, very important to attracting the highest quality people who can be successful working in this environment. And so, yeah, that's a skill. I would give my father the credit for the sales skills in my life. He was a very good salesperson, and a very charismatic person in that way. But I think like knowing that you have something that's worthwhile makes it easier, and we do here. And this community is, to say it's worthwhile is an understatement. I really.
understatement indeed. By the way, no offense. I come from a background 25 plus years in sales and sales management. And
Okay.
so to me, that's where it's like it's the skills from sales that I get to transfer outward,
Yeah.
and then others that are inheriting those sales skills
Yeah.
because it's critical in business. It just
It's critical.
is.
And as I've learned the business side of it, it's the sales part, but it's really about client relations
Of
and
course.
retention of clients and all of those really important things that if you're just selling and walking away, no one's
Mhm.
like that's not helpful really, right?
No.
That's a one-time thing. It's really about building relationships. It's really about having people kind of like slowly build up so that they truly are a part of something. And what we talk about here is feeling that you're a part of something bigger than your individual self. And that to me, I think is a concept that um, ha- from my band in high school, right?
Right.
Like,
You're listen,
sure,
band
I'm the
teacher.
trumpet player, but it's
Mhm,
really, I get to go on stage with this other group and we get
mhm.
to kind of create this music that is way more than anything I could do when I'm sitting by myself practicing. And I think it's a very similar mindset to the work that we're doing here and how individual parts add to this greater symphony, for lack of a better expression.
Nicely put. So speaking of here, uh, you already shared with me earlier, but talk to me. What got you here to
Yeah.
Philadelphia? It's an hour train ride away, and I know all
Yeah,
that.
it
But
is.
what
So
literally got you here?
yeah. So the way that I say this in a very personal and with all respect to it, I didn't come kicking and screaming, but I did fall in love with a South Jersey native
Jersey
and
girl,
girl
yay.
who grew up right on the other side of the bridge here, or the river, in New Jersey. And we had actually already left New York. We had moved up to Boston for 5 years, the Boston area, and not really liked it around there. Made some really great friends, but didn't feel at home. My wife's family was here, still in South Jersey, and we wanted to be closer to family. So Philadelphia was the perfect place. And I would say, actually, just as I'm thinking about this, and I've said that before, obviously,
Sure.
that's why I've come here. But I think, like, to any like sales job, and sure, my wife Amy, convinced me to come and that it was important.
Mhm.
But like, we've stayed and really found a home here, and that's the key. That's the really interesting thing to me, is that I can still identify as a New Yorker in many ways, but I love Philadelphia, and I love living here, and I feel at home here in many ways more than I felt anywhere else in my life. And that's being open to experiences, and that's also a city and people in a city that have proven themselves to be open to somebody like me. And I think that's what keeps us here, to be honest.
What pulled you to North 10? Who pulled
Yeah, so
you?
that
What?
was much more of a so that was more of a professional decision at the
Mhm.
beginning.
Mhm.
I had made the decision that I didn't want to be in the school system anymore, but I was still very much dedicated to young people, and also to the experiences of being in a city. I am an urban person. As much
Yep.
as I loved my experience in St. Mary Parish, I'm a city kid. And when we moved to Philadelphia, it was right before the 2016 Trump won election, and then in the 6 months after we left, he was elected, and I really wanted to, not be in this education environment, and be in a very local, setting here in Philadelphia. And I had been kind of introduced to this idea. Simply put, that place matters, right? That where you grow up is the greatest indicator of your life outcomes. And I was looking for an opportunity for that. So outside of a school setting, and as fate has it, Chase Lenfest, who's the
Mm.
founder and still board chair of what is now known as North 10, but it wasn't at that point. He was kind of grappling with the same idea. He had built a community center on North 10th Street in North Philadelphia, and that's where we get our name. And was kind of like, he had become very close to a variety of the kids and their families, and had recognized that, as much as and it was wonderful to have a community center, it wasn't enough, and that there was this environment they were living in, an environment that was a food desert, an environment that didn't have high quality K-12 schooling, an environment that didn't have high quality early childhood education, didn't have access to high quality healthcare or green spaces, and that families were struggling clearly economically and in deep seated poverty. And so he had been inspired by a group out of Atlanta called Purpose Built Communities,
Mm.
and also a group out of New York called Harlem Children's Zone. And it was thinking holistically about what kids needed, and had written, with the help of actually one of our board members now, Ingrid Boucher and Bloom Planning, a blueprint. And so then I was hired to kind of implement this blueprint of neighborhood improvement.
So,
So, like, it
major
was a much
shout
more
out to
professional
Chase.
decision. Yeah, for me.
But that's great. I love Chase. I said I didn't know, and
Yeah.
it's funny because it's the draw you said, and I love this the way you say it, which is place matters. I love that.
Place matters. It is.
There's a real depth to something like a two-word answer.
Yeah.
There's a real depth.
Yeah. And we know it. I mean, it's why people fight, to make sure that their schools are protected or their neighborhood is protected.
Right.
And there's all this terrible part about our histories of redlining and segregation and racist and
Yeah.
big actions keep people out, because I need to protect my neighborhood. So, like, deeply rooted, we understand this,
Mhm.
right? That the neighborhood that you're born in and raised in is going to truly, you know, is your trajectory to your life outcomes. Now we haven't, and those are the negative ways that we've done it, right? That people have become very protective of it.
Right.
But conceptually, the fact that, our neighborhoods have had these deliberate actions. In a neighborhood where I work in Hunting Park in East Tioga, North Philadelphia, there were deliberate actions to decimate this neighborhood. And so that we can take deliberate actions to help it out and not displace the folks that are here, has been key to our work, and I would say our success here.
And your fight. And we'll get to the
The
fight.
fight.
Well,
That
and,
absolutely.
right. I want to learn a couple things, which is like, first off, in regards to, you brought up Chase having this holistic approach and background in terms of utilizing Atlanta and Harlem and
Yep.
bringing that mindset to this area. The
Mhm.
question before the observation comes down to, when you realize that you need everything, how do you pick? Like,
Yeah.
to me, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of the business mindset, where these incredible opportunities, you're the managing director, right?
Yeah.
And that's often code for that business model. We need you to be the salesperson, the foundation person, the grant writer. So how do you then versus now prioritize in terms of needs?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind, and again, I'll give a shout out to our board member, Ingrid Boucher, who's
Right.
brilliant nonprofit strategist. But if you don't
Mhm.
have a good strategic plan,
Mhm.
you're kind of a boat just like floating in the water.
Mhm.
Um, and then you need to have the discipline to stick with that strategic plan, because it's easy just to be kind of attracted to things that come around. So, a good strategic plan gives you that guide and tells you where you've decided deliberately that you're going to go. And what's also really helpful to me, it tells me what I can say no to. And
Mm.
that's, the word no is a really important, powerful word, because there can be opportunities that come to you that you have to be like, I know that, that sounds great, but either this organization doesn't have the capacity, I don't have the knowledge how to do it, it's not the right time to do it. And so the answer right now, at least, is no, we can't do that. We're not doing that. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind, is like, have a really good strategic plan, and remind yourself to look back at it and follow it, with discipline. And then the other part is surrounding yourself with the right people, right? Like, so to the Chase part of the story and the Josh
Yeah.
part of the story, like, he knew what his skill sets and I knew what my skill sets were.
Mhm.
And so we were able to kind of differentiate. And he knew he wasn't going to run the organization. That wasn't what he set out to do. He didn't want to. He needed someone who had proven that I could run an organization, right? I could run
Right.
a school, I could run a nonprofit, a charter school, and I had this knowledge. And then I had to actually make that happen. And it was a real turnaround effort here. It was finding the right people and making a mistake and figuring out why that wasn't the right person, what the characteristics are, and what the qualities that we have, that the qualities that we needed in this organization. And so what I'll say is that what we have done over a few years here is kind of started to boil that down to, what's our, what are our design principles, is how we refer to them. Like, what makes
Design
North
principles.
Penn
Okay.
North Penn, not just the what we do. So all those things, right? Paying attention to education, healthcare, health and wellness, and economic development and mobility, and affordable housing. Sure, that's what we do. We run great programs, and we can talk more about that. But it's the how we do those things. It's when we onboard a team member and we talk about, like, what does it mean to be a North 10 team member?
Mm.
We kind of boil it down to a few specific things, right? Like, we show up. We're a place-based organization. Place matters. You can't do this job remotely,
Mhm.
right? So we show up with our heart, mind, and body, and we make sure that we're there for our residents, and we walk alongside them.
Mhm.
We don't tell them what to do. We don't tell them what not to do, right? Like, we work together on it, and we're doing it together. And one of the major parts of that here is that, like, we're all neighbors, right? Like, I don't live in this neighborhood, but I work in this neighborhood.
Mhm.
I get my lunch in this neighborhood. I park my car in this neighborhood. I walk in the park in this neighborhood. I have friends in this neighborhood. So I am part of this neighborhood. I may not be a resident, but we are all neighbors here. And I think that walking alongside is a really key part of our mindset. The authenticity, the diversity of this neighborhood, right? Like, there are so many times where people are like, oh, it's another poor neighborhood in Philadelphia, or it's full of Black and brown people, and all these kind of
Mhm.
terrible ways of just like putting a community in a box. There's an incredible strength in the diversity, and so as individuals, how we can be our authentic selves, both with our neighbors, but also of ourselves. I'm very clear with folks. I'm a New Yorker. I'm a New York Jew, right? Like I came here from a perspective and a life experience that people get to know me that way.
Mhm.
Passover's coming up. They're wishing me a happy Passover. Like, know who we are.
Mhm.
But beyond that, in the neighborhood, the folks that live here and the different places that they're from and different experiences that they're from are so important to who we are and what we do. So, like those kind of things, I think, are really important to building an organization. It's the how you go about doing it as much as it is the what do you do, and so that combined with a really good strategic plan is a lot about what we are around here.
Josh, one of the people that I referenced before, who's been on the show, I'm flattered to say, Nikki Bagby, the person who got me, I'm going to say, charged up
Yeah,
about the organization was Nikki.
yeah, yeah,
So first it was Jay, who was dragging me to a benefit, and I remember. So you just said a few things there. So I knew none of that. Like place matters. I didn't know who we are. I didn't know that I get lunch, and I don't know any of it other than a dear friend of mine wanting to drag me to
yeah,
another charitable foundation banquet.
yeah.
Awful that was my mindset. I'm like, okay, I
No, they can
know
become
this
real
sounded
bad rubber chicken events.
right. And I'm like, okay, I think I have 7 this month. And it's like, and I remember pushing back and challenging
Yeah,
Jay specifically. Why would I care?
yeah,
I like, look, I already care about this and this one and that one, and I do volunteer and blah, blah, blah. Why should I care about this? So I show up, and I remember Nikki sharing at the microphone
yeah.
the
Her
experience of
story.
people just being ignored,
Yeah.
her personal story. As
Hmm.
you just said, know who we are. Getting
Yep.
ignored. The fact is that Josh, if I saw correctly, were quoted. There was something it was one of the television stations that was covering the fact that they were dumping trash in
Yeah.
Hunting Park neighborhood. This was not that long ago, if I remember
No,
correctly,
very
right?
recent, last six
And you had to
months.
literally push back and fight that.
Yeah.
Where it could have just been like, you know what, I don't have time to care about that.
Yeah.
How do you do that and not go out of your mind?
Yeah. So that I was just
Mhm.
clarifying what that was. So the interesting thing is that the dedication to fighting litter and dumping in this neighborhood
Mhm.
is very much a part of the strategic plan of this organization that we
Mhm.
follow. So
Okay.
about 4 years ago, we set out and we did a lot of work with our neighbors and came up with a neighborhood strategic plan. And the two top things on the list,
Mm,
one was crime and safety,
okay.
safety issues, and the other was stop dumping. Like there's too much litter and dumping in our community.
Mhm.
And so to your point, like how do we make that decision? We've been told by our neighbors that this is the thing that is most important to them.
Mhm.
So when we saw an opportunity to get funding and to build a program that could address litter and unmaintained vacant lots. And there's was really kind of interesting research that came out of the University of Pennsylvania
Mhm.
that connected unmaintained vacant lots to safety issues in a neighborhood.
Mhm.
So to that end, it was great. And then to the dumping issue, the William Penn Foundation
Mhm.
came out with funding because they had also heard from the people of Philadelphia that we got to deal with this issue.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I'll say that this is I'll make this a short story, but to the listening to your neighbors and listening to your team members, because we have a group of 5 guys who clean and maintain vacant lots in our neighborhood, and they had been on the streets and around the neighborhood and had been seeing these dumping grounds and had been talking to folks about it,
Mhm.
and they came up with an innovative idea of how to address it. And it was their idea that we pitched to the William Penn Foundation to get the funding for it.
Mm.
So to the story of this organization, right? Like you need to be out on the street. If we weren't out on the street, we would never have come up with that idea. And these were people who are from this neighborhood. So
Mhm.
so the folks in the neighborhood could talk to them and really have a relationship, have a conversation. And so it's really, really important to be able to do that. In order to then do something that is so important, and it's actually making some really nice headway in the neighborhood. It wasn't my idea. It was our team members here who figured it out with the neighbors.
So does that tie toward, you brought up, like, so I was, folks, I my cheat sheet was I showed up for a breakfast open house event not long ago.
Yeah.
And one of the
Yeah.
things that Josh, you said, you were talking about collaborative fundraising or
Yeah.
streaming of
Yeah.
funds. Is that what you mean when you're talking about different avenues? And if it's not what you mean, can you
No.
walk me
Yeah.
through the effectiveness of
Yeah.
that sort of gathering funds?
So what I'll connect it to for you, John, is that as you said, right, there's this holistic approach to neighborhood revitalization.
Right.
And there's way too much for any one organization to do in there. And in fact, there's lots of expertises in all of the categories. There's expert educators, there's expert housing folks, there's people expert in healthcare, and they should stay experts. But we all know that in order to solve big, complex societal issues, you need to kind of work collaboratively, right? Because it's bigger than any one of us, right?
Right.
Our issues in our schools are about quality of teaching and having really great teachers in the classroom, but it's also that our kids aren't coming prepared, and they're not coming prepared because they're not in a safe home. They don't have a place to, that's quiet and affordable to their homes. They're malnutrition because of poverty, but also because they live in a food desert and there's not access to, right? So there's all these other things around it. So in order to really solve these complex society issues, there needs to be collective action in order to do that. And so I think that no one argues with me on that, right?
No.
We know
right.
collaboration is important. We know working together is important. We know we have to put our heads together. The problem is that organizations, individuals, they come together, but we all have our day jobs. I got to run my community center. I got to run my housing organization. I got to run my school. Who's organizing this meeting? Who's putting it together? And how are we funding this collaboration? That's the complicated part. And that's the part when you go to funders and they're like, we want people to collaborate with each other. And you're like, great. What's the mechanism to keep, not only bring us together, but keep us together? How do we kind of figure out how to fund, a collective who's doing something? If the money, does it have to go through one entity? Can it be, can you fund the joint venture, so to speak? And then, and that's not, and then funders, and there are some that have been creative and thoughtful with us, but for the most part, they're like, oh, we don't do that. We fund, workforce development, or we fund housing, or we fund education at a school time program. And so that's where it's become complicated, is to really go to funders and say, we have this not only kind of an innovative idea built on actually a fairly old school idea of collaboration, and we need help figuring out how to fund a collaboration in ways that work within your funding system and for what our outcomes are going to be. And that's been, to be completely honest, it's been really tricky to find funders who get it. Ironically, the larger funders at the event that you came, the Pew Charitable Trust, the William Penn Foundation, they're getting it, which is like remarkable, because they're big, right? It's William Penn, it's Pew Charitable Trust, they're wonderful. It's the other funders that are having a really hard time getting it.
So of those larger, they get it. I watched what I was going to say, you handle a situation which I found very impressive, and I think in terms of business acumen, it's really important that you can come off like a bulldog and be in attack mode, but you still have to get what you want in the process. So there's an expression from an old movie called Pulp Fiction that talks about an uncomfortable silence that almost would have happened where you were pushing back on one of those large organizations. And I watched the exchange and I found it fascinating, because it could have been adversarial, but it wasn't. And I wonder, what have you learned in terms of this breadth of knowledge where you are able to say what you mean, but say it in a way that people will choose to want to work with you, as opposed to, again, taking somebody's head off and then everybody leaves angry.
Yeah. So, conversation gets to repeat itself, right? It starts with relationships. And we know our funders, and we know them as individuals, know them as organizations. And I think, like, trust comes from working together in multiple um, avenues and venues, and knowing kind of each other's skill set, right? Like, you build trust because you're like, oh, he's really good at that, so I'm going to let him do that because I've seen him do it. Or, she really is dedicated to this work because I've actually seen it and talked to them about it and know it in action. And so I think, to a large extent, that's what you saw on stage there.
Yeah.
Was I used, and I'll call myself out on it, right? In which I kind of like used a phrase that typically has a negative connotation, which is an ivory tower.
Yeah.
Funder researchers,
Yep.
kind of are in this ivory tower.
Mhm.
And then the funder kind of came back and said, we're doing something about that. We recognize that that's how we're perceived. And like, right, I got kind of like, oh my God, did I insult them? But recognized quickly that, and like, it wasn't an insult, it was the state of the world. And that is a phrase that can be negative, but actually I know from my life that research is really important. We need people who are looking at something from the 30,000 foot level.
Critical.
And we need critical,
Mhm.
and we need those people to trust us on the ground level. And in order to do that, we have to build this relationship, and that they have to listen to us, and we have to hear from them and their research. And that's the relationship that we have with our funder, is that they do listen to us. So they're not that ivory tower that's just locked away there and is not listening. And that's really important. And I know that. And they know that now because they're actually doing, they're living the reality of listening to the folks that are on the ground and in community. And so the relationships really matter. Working together through tough stuff really matters. And giving each other time to understand each other in that ways really matter.
What currently, right now, you say really matters? What really matters? Do you think in
Yeah.
this day and age for North 10? What really matters?
Yeah, so I'll be completely honest with you. Sustainability. We are in a financial and economic time that makes it really hard. North 10 has been extraordinarily fortunate. We have a wonderful champion and funder and philanthropist in Chase Lenfest, who has been the world to us, and he can't do it alone, and
No.
it was never expected to do it alone, right? And so how do we take and continue to benefit from his philanthropy and generosity, and how do we make sure that what we've built can outlive him, outlive me, and continue to thrive in this neighborhood? And so I don't think, there are many nonprofits that wouldn't start answering that with saying that sustainability is a key part.
Right.
We haven't depended on government funding. We were very much in the strategic kind of fundraising stage that we were going to go after government funding.
Mhm.
And clearly that's not a path that we can go down right now, that we have to look for other, individual donors and foundations for that. And so, that it's a really, really tricky time, especially, not especially in North 10 situation. We've grown a lot in the last few years. We've doubled our size.
Mhm.
And now we have to keep it going. And we're getting an incredible amount of support.
Mhm.
And we got to look 3, 4, 5 years into the future and make sure that we can sustain it. So that on a kind of very, to your point, running a business, like, we can't be Amazon. We can't run on a deficit for years and then keep borrowing money, right? Like,
No.
not that I really understand that business
I
model.
understand what you mean. But
But
yeah,
we can't do that, right? We have to pay our bills when they come due, and run at least even, year in and year out. We can't run on a deficit. So that's the business side of it, right? That's the fundraising. That's the other part. Um, the other part of it is, and it's connected. Like, we talk and we feel really strongly that collective impact is what will be
Mm.
the methodology for really helping, change the trajectory of the young people and the people who live in this neighborhood, and really kind of promote some economic mobility. That's really difficult, particularly when there's a lack of resources. So organizations are fighting over resources, and there's got to be and I hear this from one of our colleagues anymore. Like, there's got to be ongoing transparency and an ongoing commitment to not only building trust, but once you have it, to keeping trust, because there has been so much over time that, call it unintended consequences.
Mhm.
The best of intentions aren't good enough anymore. It actually is the results. So so when there are those unintended consequences, and I use that with a little bit of quotes because I believe that a lot of them were intended.
Were intended, or right, not quite as unintended, but
but even on the best case scenario in which you really have an organization or an individual that wants to do good, and you don't see all the different pictures, then there are these unintended consequences that you have to constantly recognize, that relationships matter, that trust is easily broken, particularly in neighborhoods that have been been taken advantage of and have been in the short end of the stick time and time again. And so their reasons for being skeptical and untrusting are all valid, and it's incumbent on us to tackle that if we're going to stay working together. And so those are like the existential aspects of this, which I think are really, really important. I on a very practical level, they're from the most kind of dire statistic around here, which is that if you're born in this neighborhood, on average you'll live 15 to 20 years less than if you're born in other parts of the neighborhood. And so what are the factors, what are the determinants of health that are getting us to that? And so how we can start really working now, and that's prenatal care for mothers. And we know our Black and brown moms are not being treated well. We need an early education environment for our young people, a really high quality one. We need to really support our schools and our school system to provide high quality educational environments for our kids. We need better affordable housing stock in this neighborhood yesterday.
And I would think that maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or whatever, that there would have been a mindset that the goal would have been to get out of the neighborhood, to out, to make it out. I've heard those expressions. I made it out. Whereas now, it would be critically important, I would imagine, that it's to make it through, not to make it out. That in essence, to build a life, to have the services, as you said, you need the housing yesterday, the community services, access to food, access to jobs. And so that's the thing where it's the passion that you have shared that I've heard that makes this so fascinating for me. Josh, I will have the North 10 website up in the links. Is that the best way to find you?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. North10phl.org. And I'll give you the good overview of us. Follow us on Instagram at N10PHL, and in LinkedIn at North 10, and all those kind of typical ways are absolutely. They can find my contact there. People should reach out. They should also reach out to Nikki. She's actually a little bit more interesting than me. Nikki is our Chief External Affairs Officer.
You ain't shop liver.
No, but she is truly
Nikki's
amazing. She is amazing. And so, and come for a tour. We have a tour on third Tuesday of every month, first thing in the morning. You can sign up from our website. We'll just give a call. We love people to come on site. Seeing it, feeling it is a great way to understand it. Again, I'm an old school teacher, so take a field trip and let us
show up. Literally walk the walk. And folks, I will end with this, which is I've been to the community. I've been lucky to say I've been to the community center a few times. And to me, it's glorious. It's the community aspect of it, the most important part. But when you see it, and you really should, I'm going to say, don't be fooled by the beauty of that structure and think that everything is handled or taken care of because you're seeing a big gleaming structure. It's quite the opposite. It's to me, I see the potential, I see the magic, but it's the work that's needed when you look at any direction, and that's terribly important. Josh Klaris, you're awesome. I'm really glad this part to know you. You were great, and thank you for showing up for me and showing up for us.
back at you. My pleasure.
Thanks, sir. Folks, you've just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Keep watching, liking, sharing, listening. Tell your friends and family. Get involved with North 10 Philadelphia, and we'll keep driving content through your door. John Duffin here, Duffin Media. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great day. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.